We're told Shashi Tharoor, Congress MP and chairperson of the Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Affairs, is with us right now. Can I go across to Mr. Tharoor?
Hello, how are you, Parikshit?
All right, let me go across to Pramit Pal Chaudhary. Till that time, Pramit, how do you see the situation as a result of tariffs? And what happens to BRICS now? Do you think India and BRICS nations have enough levers in these negotiations with Donald Trump?
Well, Mr. Panda, what happened? See, we were saying hello.
All right, Shashi Tharoor, Congress MP, is with us right now. Mr. Tharoor, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Let me begin by asking you, 50% tariffs seems very imminent right now. Do you think India will be able to come up with some sort of negotiated solution in the next 20 days?
Well, that's precisely what we have to trust our negotiators to do, Parikshit, because the truth of the matter is that's going to be an impossible position to find ourselves in. But there's something terribly unjust and unfair about this entire proceeding at the moment, because, as you know, on the 27th of August, if we have 50% on our goods, the Chinese, who are buying far more Russian oil and gas than we are, and trading on a larger number of other items besides, will only have 30%. So what happened to the great strategic partnership with India? What happened to their alleged competition with China? It seems very, very bizarre that the Americans are in the process of jettisoning a relationship they've spent a quarter of a century cultivating and building up for apparently some very petty short-term gains. I don't understand it. But our negotiators should definitely go in a spirit of saying where we can make reasonable concessions, we will, but we will not be dictated to. There has to be give and take on both sides. And certainly we're not going to accept a situation where it's, you take it or leave it, it's my way or the highway kind of thing coming from Washington. If that happens, I think we'll take the highway. And we should.
Right. When it comes to having some sort of options in the diplomatic toolkit. Now, this is a very old relationship that we've invested in over the past 2 decades, Mr. Tharoor. Is it really possible for India to let this relationship go down as a result of a trade deal going sour?
But listen, Parikshit, it's not us who've done this, right? I mean, the entire sourness in the relationship has come from the extremely insulting language of a highly transactional negotiator. Now, if this had been conducted differently, it might have been a different story. But the way in which this thing has been done, the way in which the gentleman has spoken of us, a sovereign, self-respecting country, becomes very difficult for any Indian political leadership to swallow, number one. Number two, you can't have a relationship which one side values more than the other does. If America values us so little that they're prepared to throw us overboard so quickly over relatively trivial amounts for an economy the size of America's, then I'm afraid we may have been wrong in assuming our relationship was that important to them. Whereas previous American presidents have made it very clear that they valued India in India's own right as a significant presence in this part of the world, as an alternative pole to the Chinese, as a democratic ally with shared interests, no particular strategic lack of convergence, a population, I think almost 4 million Americans are of Indian descent. We had so much in common, and of course the shared values rhetoric as well. All of that kept us going as partners. Now, if all of this can be tossed aside with this kind of somewhat demeaning and belittling language by the American president, then we do also have to ask ourselves, what was all this worth? I'm still hoping that it's purely just a negotiating tactic, and that the real work that's happening between the actual professionals, the negotiators from our Commerce Ministry, the negotiators from the American Trade Negotiators Office, that they are talking in a much more practical and constructive way, and they're getting things moving. And Mr. Trump's rhetoric was just sort of the accompanying soundtrack in order to put some pressure on the negotiation. That could well be it. Mr. Trump is fairly famous for having a very idiosyncratic negotiating style. And I think it may just be that. Let's not overreact. I'm always in favor of keeping a fairly cool head on these matters. But come 27th of August, if we are at 50%, let me be very clear, the bottom is going to drop out of a lot of our exports in the American market. No one is going to buy items from us at 50% tariff when even China is 30%, our competitors like Vietnam, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Bangladesh even are between 19 and 15%. Why would anyone buy anything from us at 50% premium? It's simply not. Even 25, the original tariff imposed upon us, puts the onus on us to somehow make up that 6 to 10% differential with our competitors. With 50%, we're out of the game. We're not even in the race. So we have to understand that in those circumstances, we have no choice but to look for other markets, to look for other outlets. And there will be creative things happening. I mean, I wouldn't be at all surprised if there aren't some smart Indians in the UK where we now have an arrangement with the FTA where 99% of our goods are going without any tariffs to the UK, who will figure out a way of importing all the things from India that America used to buy, repackaging them as made in UK and reshipping them to America for a tidy profit. Anything like that could happen. Who knows? But I mean, that's unfortunate for both Americans and Indians, but that seems to be where we might be heading if we don't manage to pull off a decent negotiation in the next 3 weeks.
Right. Mr. Tharoor, you spent a lot of time in the United States, in Washington, D.C., meeting think tanks, meeting members of the diaspora and the U.S. government. What do you think has gone wrong in the India-U.S. relationship? It's clearly not just about Russian oil.
Well, when I was there was no inkling of any such negativism. On the contrary, we found tremendous receptivity, tremendous support. I met, God knows, 50, 60 people, top influential people in Washington, not just think tanks and media, but also, frankly, a large number of senators and congressmen from both political parties, the Deputy Secretary of State and the entire establishment in the State Department, the kind of reception we got, and then Mr. Vice President Vance himself, totally positive, totally supportive, very keen on strengthening relations with India across the board, very keen on the success of the trade talks, very keen on cooperation in technology and artificial intelligence. I came back thinking this relationship was in great shape. So I am utterly stunned that the president seems so out of sync with what everybody else we met was conveying to us. It's true that I wasn't there to do trade negotiations. I was there to talk about Operation Sindoor and our political relationship. But the number of conversations I had, they couldn't all have been in the direction of positive relationship with India when the president apparently is alone on a completely different track. I don't get it.
Right. What do you think can be done now? If I ask you to put on the hat of a diplomat, and someone who is a seasoned politician over decades, what can be done right now? Here you have a president who is trying to put pressure on Russia and wants India to stop purchase of Russian oil because he thinks that will hurt the Russian economy. What can India really do? How do we balance out trade relations and also a strategic partnership with Russia? Can we afford to cut off oil purchases from Russia altogether?
Look, that depends on market conditions. And if the differential is significant, we won't cut it off. I mean, we have every reason to look after the interests of Indians who need energy. I mean, it's as simple as that. We have said we'll always act in our national interest. If there is a continuing differential between the world market price that anybody else will sell oil to us and the price at which the Russians are selling to us, why shouldn't we buy Russian oil? I'm sorry to say, until and unless there are sort of United Nations approved global sanctions, we are not obliged to accept any country unilaterally dictating to us who we can and cannot buy from. The same, by the way, applies to the others. The Chinese are buying far more than us. If the Americans don't have the guts to sanction the Chinese but will sanction us, then I think we have to draw our conclusions from that. Look, our self-respect matters, Parikshit. After 200 years of colonialism, we are not a country that can be talked to this way, taken for granted or pushed around. We will stand up because we have convictions, and what is more, any Indian government would have stood up to this kind of pushing around. So I will say to you, I hope our negotiators go with courage and clarity, with a good sense of where we can make concessions. Remember, we made very sensible concessions in the first Trump term when he made this big fuss about Harley-Davidson motorbikes. It didn't hurt us at all. Instead of selling 83 Harley-Davidsons a year to India, they now sell about 280 or whatever. It didn't affect anything because the reduction of tariffs only affected a very small market and a very small elite segment of Indian consumers. There may be other items like that the Americans are making a fuss about, but we can give in because it will not hurt our market. But when it comes to something like, for example, dumping a large quantity of American agricultural grains, which, by the way, are heavily subsidized in America, on the Indian market at a time when 700 million Indian farmers and people living on the farms are dependent on agriculture for their survival, when farmers are committing suicide every year in many states of our country, that's unthinkable for any Indian government. We are not going to permit that to happen. We will have to have a red line. We are a democracy. We are accountable to our farmers. We're accountable to our voters. But as a democracy themselves, America should understand that. If our negotiators can explain why some things are not feasible and explain it convincingly enough, I would think that an American negotiator will go back to Mr. Trump and say, look, it's not possible. We can't get them to give in on this. On the other hand, they gave in on that. That's how negotiations work. If we can do that kind of negotiating, Parikshit, I'm not at all, I wouldn't be entirely unhappy or entirely surprised if with some concessions, we come out with a win-win. But if we don't, if the Americans dig their heels and say, you will do exactly what we want, it's my way or the highway, then I think we should take the highway because the highway is open to us. We have plenty of other countries we can turn to, and we have plenty of other options on the horizon. I don't think
what is the concession? What are those concessions we can give, Mr. Tharoor?
I'm not a trade negotiator, and I'd be foolish of me to put myself in the seat of all these very well-briefed colleagues from the Commerce Ministry who are sitting and talking to their American counterparts. Let them do their work. All I'm saying is they should know where there's...
One more thing that I ask you... One more thing that I want to ask you is that... Right, since Operation Sindoor, Donald Trump has tried to take credit for the ceasefire 24 to 25 to 30 times. There is also a view that perhaps India could have just told the US and Donald Trump that we appreciate your role in stopping Pakistan and warning Pakistan and making them stop the war and, and standing up for India against terrorism. Do you think the situation could have been handled better? Because as a president who wants things acknowledged, who wants things acknowledged on social media, we should have given him that victory?
Look, I think that is possibly what he had in mind, is that he must have put pressure on the Pakistanis. You remember that the Prime Minister said to the Indian public that Mr. Trump didn't call me and there was no pressure on me. And not only was he justified in saying that, but the Indian signal from the day one of Operation Sindoor was clear and unambiguous. If Pakistan hits us, we will hit them back, but otherwise we are only retaliating against terror. We've done our job and we're done. So if Pakistan hits, we hit, but if Pakistan stops, we'll stop. So we didn't need persuading by Mr. Trump or by anybody else. But maybe when we hit the Pakistani air bases on the night of the 9th, 10th of May, I beg your pardon, of May. And when we did that and we caused devastation to the Pakistani air bases, maybe at that point, some hotheads in Pakistan were contemplating some deeply irresponsible escalation. And maybe the Americans got wind of it and lent on them. And Trump said, don't do this. I don't want to have a nuclear country going to war with another nuclear country, whatever. And the Pakistanis then gave in to Mr. Trump and said, fine, we'll sue for peace the next day, which they did. Now, if that is what happened, then we should certainly have considered thanking Mr. Trump. I might say that when I was asked in Washington about this, that's exactly what I said. I said, we didn't need persuading, but if Mr. Trump has persuaded the Pakistanis, I'm sure we're all grateful for it. That was the kind of language I used. And perhaps we could have telegraphed that at a higher level. Maybe at that time, a call to the president might have flattered him suitably. I don't know. But for two big sovereign nations to be worrying about the offended egos of individuals is somewhat unusual in terms of global diplomacy. And perhaps we should have to sort of relearn some of our core approaches in dealing with a somewhat unusual president.
Right. Mr. Tharoor, my final question to you would be, there is, of course, concern about the impact on the Indian economy if we were to stop buying Russian crude at discounted prices, if we have to buy crude at market prices globally and we have to buy them from other sources around the world, that could create inflationary pressures on India. There's a report by Moody's which has said that this is going to impact the growth in India. There will be a hit to the GDP as well. India will become more uncompetitive compared to other economies in Asia, which have a 15 to 20% tariff rate. We would have a 50. What's the larger worry, and how important is it for India to salvage this situation?
It is important, but, look at the invidious choices you're confronted with. On the one hand, you lose a substantial market or a large portion of it because $90 billion is at stake with America. Some of it, by the way, is not affected, at least not yet, by the 50%. That's pharmaceuticals, because the Americans are dependent on us for about half their pharmaceutical supplies, and they don't want to make that unaffordable to the American public in the drugstores of America. So our pharmaceuticals will probably continue being sold to America at prices that they are happy to pay. But so we won't lose the entire 90 billion, but there will be some large portion that will simply be lost to us. By comparison, if we want to save that 90 billion, what do we have to do? If we have to now take a major hit on our energy supplies from Russia, buy more expensive things and drive up the cost of everything across the board, we will have to do some very sensible calculations as to which hurts our economy more. If we are going to lose a bit of the American market, what will we lose? Maybe 0.5% of GDP. If we're going to have much higher energy prices, what will we lose? Maybe 1% of GDP? I don't know. Some econometricians and statisticians far more qualified than me should work out the pros and cons. And I'm sure that Mr. Piyush Goyal would be very happy to know which is the more cost-effective option. But there is also, as I said, the question of our self-respect. And I think, frankly, it is very unlikely that India will simply surrender to people who are kicking us around. So that's the other thing. I think we are going to stand up for our own pride, our own place in the world. And if it means cocking a snook at somebody who's being rather insulting and behaving in some respects like a schoolyard bully, insults about, your economy is dead and I don't care if you take it down with the dead economy and so on. This kind of stuff is like a schoolyard bully telling a smaller kid your mother is ugly. I mean, it's really belittling language. It's meant to demean the other person, but it's not to be taken literally. However, it does have to be taken seriously because of the costs involved. And I will say to you frankly, Parikshit, at the end of the day, we will and must preserve the right to walk away. If we can get a fair deal, a balanced deal, where we're not making unreasonable concessions, we should probably take it. If we can't, then to my mind, we should say to the Americans, thanks, we thought you valued this relationship. Clearly you don't. We're going to find other places to go and play. And I think that those places are available to us. And we will have to try and completely reorient not just our economics and trade, but even our geostrategic approaches to the world. But if we are forced to do it, I think we have the capacity, the wit, as it were, the capability of doing what we need to do. I just hope it doesn't come to that.
Mr. Tharoor.
We do have a lot of common values with the US, shared strategic interests so far, and of course, this large diaspora descended from India, living in America. I would not want to see all that being jeopardized. But if the worst comes to the worst, Parikshit, standing up for India is what this is all about. And that's ultimately the bottom line for us. Any government.
All right, Mr. Tharoor.
Put India ahead of anything.
Mr. Tharoor, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate the fact that you took out time for CNBC TV 18, talking about tariffs and the tensions between India and US. Let's see what happens over the next 21 days. To take this forward, we're now joined by Pramit Pal.